All right, so you know how sometimes you really want to understand something, but like it's buried under all this noise and fluff, right?
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
that's kind of the idea behind this deep dive we're going to do. It's like cutting through all that, just getting straight to the good stuff.
Hmm.
And today, we're looking at true crime, like seriously gripping stuff, real hold on to your hats kind of stories.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it is. And get this, they're all from places you wouldn't expect. We're talking Hong Kong, Singapore, all over Asia, places known for being, well, safe.
Huh. That's interesting. I always thought those areas had really low crime rates.
Right. That's what makes these cases so crazy. We actually got the inspiration for this deep dive from this article in Expat Living.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it really opened my eyes. It's like there's this whole hidden side to these places, this undercurrent of violence that doesn't make the headlines as often.
That makes sense. It's easy to have a certain perception of a place, especially if you're not living there day to day.
Exactly. So we're not just going to recount every gory detail here. Right.
That's not the point. We're extracting the key takeaways, the almost unbelievable stuff, the things that make you go, wait, what? So if you want the express route to being seriously in the know about this stuff, well, you're in the right place.
Buckle up, folks.
Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first, just to set the stage, why do these cases stand out so much?
Well, I think it has to do with where they happened, right? Like you said, these are areas that we often associate with stability, low crime.
Yeah, almost like a utopian image in terms of safety.
Exactly. So when these really violent crimes happen, it kind of shatters that image, forces us to confront a different reality.
And I think that's what's so fascinating about these stories. It's like a peek behind that curtain, a reminder that darkness can really happen anywhere, regardless of how safe we perceive a place to be.
Totally agree. Human nature, right. It's unpredictable no matter where you are in the world. Couldn't have said it better myself. So with that in mind, let's dive into our first case. And this one really sets the tone for the whole deep dive. It's known as the Milkshake Murder. Happened in Hong Kong back in 2003.
The Milkshake Murder. Okay, that's a name. What happened?
Well, what makes it even more shocking is that it involved expats, like people who'd moved there for a supposedly better life,
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that. That definitely adds another layer to it.
Yeah, and not just any expats. We're talking about Nancy Kissel and her husband, Robert, an investment banker. Imagine, they were probably living the life that many people dream of when they move to a place like Hong Kong.
And then what? Something went horribly wrong, obviously.
Oh, yeah. You see, Nancy laced a strawberry milkshake with sedatives. Can you imagine the level of premeditation there?
A milkshake? That seems almost deliberately mundane for such a sinister act.
Right, like it's a drink you associate with childhood, innocence. And to use that as a weapon is just chilling. But the most disturbing detail, she had their 6-year-old daughter deliver it to Robert.
Oh my God, that is absolutely horrific. To involve a child like that,
Yeah.
It's beyond comprehension.
It didn't end there. After he was sedated, she bludgeoned him to death with a statuette. Not a quick, clean kill, but a violent, brutal act.
I can't even begin to imagine the level of rage and coldness that must have driven her to do something like that.
And then the cover-up. She tried to hide his body by rolling it up in a carpet and stashing it in their storeroom. It was only when Robert was reported missing from work that the whole horrifying truth started to unravel.
So it wasn't like a spontaneous act of passion. It was planned, executed, and she tried to cover it up. Chilling.
Exactly. And the legal proceedings, they were pretty intense. She was convicted twice, once in 2005 and again in 2011, and both times she got a life sentence.
Wow, 2 convictions. They really wanted to make sure justice was served.
Yeah. But here's the kicker. Get this. As recently as 2014, she said she had no regrets. Claimed it was because of clinical depression and an abusive relationship.
Huh. That's a lot to unpack. While it might shed some light on a possible context, it certainly doesn't justify murder.
Definitely not. But it does add another layer of complexity to an already disturbing case.
Absolutely. It makes you think about the role of mental health, domestic abuse. It's a real tragedy all around.
All right, so let's move on to our next case, and this one takes us to Singapore. It's called the Yushen Triple Murder.
Triple murder. Okay, that sounds even more intense.
It is. And what's even crazier is that it all started from something so ordinary, so seemingly insignificant.
Really? Like what? A parking spot dispute?
Even more mundane than that. It was an argument over dinner. The woman, Ms. Zhang Meng, wanted crabs, and her partner, Wang Zijian, didn't.
Crabs? You're kidding.
Nope. That's what the article says. He felt humiliated by her insistence, and in a fit of rage, stabbed her repeatedly.
Oh my God, that's just insane. To go from a disagreement about dinner to murder, it's terrifying how quickly things can escalate.
And it gets worse. He didn't stop there. He also murdered her 17-year-old daughter, Feng Jianyu.
Oh no, that's just heartbreaking.
But wait, there's more. A mother and daughter, who happened to be staying in the same apartment, also became victims. It was a full-blown rampage.
This is just horrible, this poor family, and then these innocent women caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, and it's just so senseless. The mother, Yang Ji, tried to escape, but she tragically fell from a 6th-floor window and died.
Yeah.
Her 15-year-old daughter, Mrs. Lin Mylan, somehow survived. It's a miracle, but you can only imagine the trauma she must have endured.
Absolutely. The ripple effects of violence like this are just devastating. It's not just the immediate victims, but everyone around them, their families, the community.
Right, it's like this dark cloud that hangs over everything. And there's this one detail about the perpetrator that's really unsettling. The article mentions that Wang had some pretty telling tattoos.
Tattoos? How so?
Well, in May 2007, he got a portrait of Mrs. Zhang tattooed on his back.
That's... Well, I guess it could be seen as a declaration of love, in a way.
Yeah, maybe. But then, just 8 months later, he got another tattoo. This one was a skeleton that looked a lot like Ms. Zhang, and it was slowly consuming his heart.
Whoa. Okay, that's definitely not a good sign. It's like a visual representation of their deteriorating relationship and his internal turmoil.
Right, almost like a premonition of the violence that was to come. It's chilling to think about.
It is. It makes you wonder if those tattoos were a cry for help or a warning sign that everyone missed.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the killer Bomo. It happened in Malaysia. And this one is, well, it's got a lot of layers, a lot of bizarre twists and turns.
The killer Bomo. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's a Bomo?
It's like a shaman, a traditional healer. Now, this particular Bomo, her name was Mona Fandey, and get this, she was a pop singer before she became a shaman. Quite the career change, huh?
Wow, that is a dramatic shift from pop star to spiritual leader. I wonder what prompted that.
Right. But what's even more interesting is that she had a clientele of rich and powerful people, politicians, businessmen, you name it. They all sought her out, believed in her mystical powers.
That's fascinating. It makes you think about the human need for control, for an edge, even if it means turning to the supernatural.
Totally. And that's where our next character comes in. Manlen Idris, a state assemblyman who was convinced that Mona Fandey could help him climb the political ladder. He wanted power, and he believed she could give it to him.
So he was one of her clients?
Yep, and he was completely taken in by her. She promised him invincibility, said she could make him untouchable.
Invincibility, that's a pretty bold claim.
It is. But Maslam bought it. He paid her a huge sum of money, RM 500,000, and even gave her land titles, all for this so-called ritual that would make him invincible.
And I'm guessing the ritual didn't quite go as planned.
You guessed it. In July 1993, during this supposed ritual, Mona Fandey and her accomplices beheaded Maslan.
Oh my God. So much for invincibility.
Right. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they then chopped up his body and buried it under a storeroom. It's a story of ambition, greed, and ultimately betrayal.
And what about Mona Fandey? Did she get away with it?
Nope. Her downfall, a spending spree. She went out and bought a Mercedes-Benz, jewelry, all sorts of expensive stuff.
Classic mistake. It's like they say, easy come, easy go, especially when easy come involves murder.
Exactly. Her sudden wealth obviously raised some eyebrows. People started asking questions, and eventually the police caught up with her. She, her husband, and 2 accomplices were hanged in 2001.
Wow, what a story. It's a reminder that even those who claim to have supernatural powers are ultimately subject to the law and their own greed.
All right, ready for another one? This next case takes us back to Hong Kong. It's called the Hello Kitty horror.
The Hello Kitty horror. That sounds, well, strangely innocent for a true crime case.
That's what makes it so disturbing. It's this clash between something we associate with childhood, cuteness, and then this absolutely horrific act of violence.
Okay, I'm officially creeped out. What happened?
So the victim was a 23-year-old nightclub hostess named Fan Man Yi. She was kidnapped by 3 men.
Kidnapped.
And then they held her captive in a flat in Sim Shat Sui. And here's where the Hello Kitty part comes in.
Yeah.
The flat was decorated with Hello Kitty toys.
Wait, what? Hello Kitty toys? That's surreal and really disturbing.
Right. It's like this juxtaposition of innocence and evil.
Yeah.
And what they did to her in that flat, it's almost too horrific to describe.
But they tortured her, didn't they?
Yeah. For a whole month, it was relentless Brutal, just unimaginable cruelty.
Oh, God. I can't even like that poor woman.
And when she finally died, they dismembered her body and threw it in the trash.
That's just monstrous.
But here's the detail that really makes this case stick with you. They sewed her skull into a giant Hello Kitty doll.
No, that's, I don't even know what to say. It's pure evil.
It's one of those details that just sears itself into your memory. And what's even crazier is that the case only came to light because one of the killer's girlfriends, a teenage girl, started having nightmares about it.
Wow, talk about a guilty conscience. It's like even the subconscious couldn't handle the horror of what they did.
Right. The three men were eventually caught and sentenced to life in prison in November 2000.
At least there was some justice for Fan Manny. But that image, that Hello Kitty doll, it's going to stay with me for a while.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those cases that sticks with you. Okay, let's move on to our next case, and this one's from South Korea. The killer's name was Yoo Young-chul, and he was active between 2003 and 2004.
Okay, another serial killer. What made this one stand out?
The sheer number of victims. He killed 21 people.
21? That's a horrifyingly high number. What drove him to kill so many?
Well, according to the article, he had this deep-seated hatred for wealthy people and for women.
A misogynist and like a class warrior. A strange combination.
It is. It's like all his rage and frustration got channeled into these horrific acts of violence. He started by breaking into homes and killing wealthy senior citizens. But then, after being rejected by an escort girl, he shifted his focus to prostitutes and female masseuses.
So his hatred towards women intensified after that rejection.
Yeah, it seems that way. And the way he killed them, it was incredibly brutal. He dismembered them, mutilated their bodies, even reportedly engaged in cannibalism.
Oh my God.
That's so.
Beyond depraved. It's like he was trying to erase them, not just kill them.
Yeah, there was a real sense of rage and hatred behind his actions. He's currently in jail awaiting execution. And his story actually inspired the film The Chaser, which, if you haven't seen it, is a pretty intense watch.
Wow, I might have to check that out. It's amazing how real-life horror can sometimes be even more disturbing than anything we can imagine.
Definitely. Okay, ready for our next stop? This one takes us to Macau, and it's known as the Pork Bun Massacre.
The Pork Bun Massacre. Okay, that's just... the name alone is unsettling.
It is. And the story behind it is just as chilling. So we've got a restaurant owner, Jing Lin, who's deep in gambling debt. He owes money to a guy named Huang Zhiheng.
Okay, some money troubles. Not uncommon, unfortunately.
Right. But this is where it takes a dark turn. Huang shows up at Jing Lin's restaurant, the Eight Immortals, and things get violent.
Violent how?
We're talking full-blown massacre.
Cool.
Huang ends up killing Zheng Lin and 9 members of his family. 10 victims in total.
Oh my God, 10 people. That's an unimaginable level of violence.
And it gets worse. He used butcher knives to dismember all 10 of them. The whole process took him 8 hours.
8 hours. I can't even fathom that. The sheer brutality, the time it must have taken.
Yeah, it's hard to comprehend. And it took a year for the truth to come out. Body parts started washing up in the sea, turning up in garbage bins. It was a horrifying discovery.
And what about Huang? Was he caught?
Oh, yeah. And here's where it gets really disturbing. After the murders, Huang actually continued to run the restaurant.
He ran the restaurant after killing the owner and his family. That's beyond creepy.
Right. And that's where the rumors about the pork buns started.
Wait, you mean...
People started speculating that he might have used the victims' remains in the pork buns. It was never proven, but the very thought of it is enough to turn your stomach.
Oh, God. That's the stuff of nightmares.
It is.
Oh.
And it's one of the things that makes this case so infamous. The uncertainty, the speculation, it just adds another layer of horror. Huang ended up committing suicide in prison in 1986. But the legend, the rumors, they live on.
It's like a real-life urban legend, a cautionary tale that's just too gruesome to forget.
Exactly. Oh, and there's also a movie based on it, a Hong Kong film called The Untold Story. It's pretty graphic, but it captures the sheer terror of the case.
I think I'll pass on that one. My stomach can only handle so much.
Fair enough.
God.
All right, let's move on to our next case. This one takes us to Thailand, and it's a little different from the others. It's the story of Sai Kway, often called Thailand's most terrifying man.
Thailand's most terrifying man. That's quite a title. What did he do?
Well, back in 1959, he was executed for the abduction and murder of 7 children.
Oh, God, that's horrible. 7 children.
Yeah, and his motive was even more disturbing. He believed that eating their organs would make him immortal.
Eating their organs for immortality. That's not just terrifying, it's deeply disturbing. It's like something out of a horror movie.
Right. But what's even more interesting is what happened after his death. His body was studied at Siraj Medical School, And then, get this, it was put on display at the Forensic Museum.
On display, like in a museum.
Yep. They embalmed him and put him in a glass case labeled Cannibal. And for decades, he was a popular attraction.
Wow, that's a strange way to deal with the serial killer's remains. It's like they wanted to both study him and make an example of him.
Yeah, it's this weird mix of scientific curiosity and a desire to, I don't know, maybe contain evil or something. But here's the twist. His body was only cremated in 2020, and recent research suggests that he might not have even committed all the murders he was accused of.
Really? So he might have been wrongly accused, or at least partly wrongly accused.
Exactly. It's a reminder that sometimes the stories we tell ourselves about criminals, especially these larger-than-life boogeyman figures, might not be entirely accurate. But even with these new findings, his legacy as Thailand's most terrifying man lives on.
It just goes to show how powerful stories are, especially when they tap into our primal fears.
Okay, ready for our final case. This one's from Singapore, and it's known as the Curry murder.
The Curry murder. Okay, that sounds oddly specific. What's the story there?
So back in 1984, a man named Ayakano Maramuthu disappeared. His wife, Naragavali Ramaya, reported him missing. But 3 years later, an informant came forward with a truly horrific story.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did the informant say?
According to them, Ayakano had been beaten to death, chopped up, and then cooked in a curry.
Cooked in a curry?
Yep, with chili, spices, rice, the whole works.
Oh my God, that's just, I don't even know what to say. It's beyond gruesome.
Right, and it caused a huge panic in Singapore. People were terrified of accidentally eating human flesh.
I can only imagine. It's like something out of a horror movie, except this actually happened.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that just gets under your skin.
Hmm.
Naragatha and her 3 brothers were charged with the murder, but they were eventually released due to lack of evidence.
So it's still unsolved.
Yep. To this day, nobody knows what really happened to Ayakano. They never found his remains, the murder weapon, or even the pot they supposedly used to cook him.
Wow, that's unsettling. A true mystery with a really dark twist.
All right, so there you have it. A deep dive into some truly shocking and disturbing true crime stories from Hong Kong, Singapore, and beyond. We've covered everything from milkshake murders to killer bomos, from Hello Kitty horrors to curries with a very dark secret.
It's been a wild ride, that's for sure. And I think it really highlights the fact that even in places we think of as safe and orderly, darkness can lurk in the shadows.
Absolutely. These cases are a stark reminder that violence can happen anywhere, and the motivations behind it can be complex and often disturbing.
From greed and jealousy to misplaced rage and twisted desires, the human capacity for evil is, unfortunately, very real.
And that brings us to a final thought for you, our listener. After delving into these dark and disturbing stories, what are your takeaways? What does it make you think about human nature, about the world we live in? It's certainly a lot to process.
It is. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What drives people to commit such horrific acts? And how can we, as a society, prevent these tragedies from happening?
Those are some really big questions, and unfortunately, there are no easy answers. But by understanding the darkness that exists, by shining a light on these difficult stories, maybe, just maybe, we can start to find some solutions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an experience.
To say the least.
Stay safe out there, everyone.
Be kind to each other.